Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephen Spencer, and today we have Steve Good with us. Steve is an entrepreneur, business executive, and best-selling author of Be Left Behind. He's been featured on CNBC, BuzzFeed, and How to Geek. He spent 20 years in fintech, and he's been an independent consultant advising tech startups and blockchain companies since 2016. Steve, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Stefan. Nice to be here.
So we're not going to be
Really nice
talking
to be
about
here.
fintech. We're not going to be talking about blockchain, cryptocurrency. Well, we might touch on it. We're going to be talking about the whole craziness that's out there and how to prepare ourselves so that we can look after ourselves, our families, our loved
Yeah,
ones, and have what we need, protect ourselves and our loved ones. So let's
cool.
dive in. But first, I want
Yeah,
you
for
to
sure.
give a little bit of background on how you became such an expert on this area because it you didn't plan it this way. It just kind of you
No,
realized that this needed to happen, so you became an
yeah,
expert just in
100%.
time.
Yeah, for sure. I've never been one that was a doomsday guy or a prepper guy. I mean, the term prepper is the term that everybody uses now. Um, that certainly wasn't me ever. I always thought like, you saw things happening like Waco, Texas, or people hiding in the woods in Idaho or whatever it was. And I always thought it's very strange. I don't understand why people have this mentality to be this way. But something seems to have changed, and I was able to, I guess, identify or recognize it earlier than others. And I thought something feels off. That I just started going through a process of deep dive learning, researching, asking people questions, following certain Telegram groups. And the more I uncovered, the more that I became aware that I needed to be a little bit more prepared and more prepared. And I thought, can't hurt to have some food and some medicines in the house. And if nothing happens, then I have extra food in the house. And if something does happen, well, at least I know I'm prepared.
Yeah.
So it's been a very odd rabbit hole to go down, that's for sure.
Because it starts with the food and the water and the medicines, but there are so many things. Like I didn't even know
Yeah,
about a pulse oximeter. I didn't even know what that was. It's a little device that you stick on your fingertip to measure not just your pulse, but your blood oxygenation level. And the purpose of this is you should be monitoring if you've been exposed to the virus, which many of us will be. It's important to not only measure your temperature on a regular basis because fever
yeah,
is a big indicator of it. Not always, you don't always get a fever, but very often you do. And you also will likely get shortness of breath, and
right,
your blood won't get fully oxygenated. So if you
right.
are monitoring this and you go below 90%, that's uh-oh time. We got to do something fast. So if you're not able to measure that with a pulse oximeter, how are you going to know?
That's interesting. So one of the ways that I learned to check whether or not you're able to breathe appropriately is take a deep breath each morning when you wake up and hold your breath for at least 10 seconds.
Mm,
Because people that are having any form of lung problem immediately will start to cough or find it difficult to breathe and not be able to hold it for 10 seconds. So to be honest, it's become a morning ritual. Every morning I wake up, and I mean, I've been in quarantine now for over 4 weeks, but I still do it every day. It's sort of a morning thing. I wake up, I take a deep breath, hold it for 10, 15, 20 seconds and say, okay, carry on with my day. Um, yeah, that's a really weird toy. I mean, I've got some other weird toys like UV lights for, like a UV wand that you can wave over things so that you can kill bacteria. I've got an ozonator that you can use for basically cleaning an entire room of bacteria and viruses by just soaking a room in ozone air for, half an hour. Great for the car as well to get rid of bacteria and stuff if you've got little kids. So it's got a lot of uses, but my God, it makes the room smell fresh. And I've used it in the pantry as well for fresh fruits and vegetables. And the pantry smells incredibly fresh now, like as if you're going into like the local like grocery store in like a small village or town or something. But it also it really like it just makes the fruits and vegetables last a lot longer and freshens them up. So it's there's a lot of really weird toys. You can get ham radios or radios for listening on shortwave. There's just all sorts of weird stuff you can go and get.
Yeah, yeah. So the UV disinfectant, that's so that anything that's been exposed, the virus that might be on it gets
Correct.
killed off. I read
Right.
recently that a lot of hospitals are running out of masks, and so what they're doing to prolong the time that they can still have masks is to UV disinfect the masks and reuse them. I don't know if you
Yeah,
saw
and
that.
that's I have seen that. Yeah, and I mean that plus well, so normally when you make masks, now we're talking about making masks. So I've actually gone down that rabbit hole learning about that too. When masks are made, I mean, there's a whole process for creating them, but then at the end before they're put out to people, sold, they are disinfected, and the way they do it is with UV light.
Gotcha.
So doing it at home is exactly the same thing to, reinvigorate them. I mean, you don't want to use masks for too long because eventually the material itself will wear down or the filtering process isn't as effective. But certainly for, using a mask for lots of little short-term usage, then the risk you always face is that just by breathing in the any viruses that are on the mask could be on the outside of the mask, and when you take the mask off from the outside of your with your hand, you've just put it on your hand, and you're like, oh, oops, that wasn't very wise. So then, of course, the next thing you should probably do that you've taken a mask off your hand is one is, UV wand it, but the other thing is have 62% and above sterilization, alcohol-based sterilization, hand sterilization or sterilizer, because 60% is what doctors have generally recommended. So we have some that's, just a big bottle, just so when you drive in the house, we've got it right there, right when we walk in, so we can immediately sterilize our hands as well. But yeah, there's lots of weird things like that you can do.
Right. So the integrity of the mask also will get compromised if you keep touching the mask itself on the front. You need to take it from the very edges so that
Correct.
you're not contaminating the mask in the front, and also the integrity of the mask is not compromised. Yeah.
Yep.
So you said 60% alcohol. That's like rubbing alcohol or ethanol
Well,
or
it's
what?
well, like you talk about, like, I mean, I'll just show you an example. There's like these typical, like, like these little hand sterilizer, liquids. But a lot of these ones that you buy off the shelf, like in supermarkets, don't tend to be 60% or above. So you're talking about like a medical grade one, but you can still buy medical grade hand sanitizers on Amazon or other Walmart or other places in the UK or, around Europe or US. So you just look for the ones that are 60% and above. That's all. And you can get the large bottles, and they have the little, the little pumps. You can just get a little bit on your hand at a time. You don't have to open up the bottle and handle the bottle. You literally just you pump a little bit out, wipe your hands, you're all set.
Yep. So you've been in quarantine for a month. We're going to come back to all the different
Yeah.
things to have in the house or in your car or what have you.
Games.
Games are very important. Yeah. So you have
Yeah.
been in quarantine for 4 weeks now. Now you're in Europe, so you guys are a bit ahead at experiencing what we will be experiencing in, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 days, something like that over here in the States. But so what prompted your decision to get into quarantine? Or I guess, first of all, can you
Yeah.
differentiate for our listener what is self quarantine, self isolation? The differences between those, and then now there's some other terms being thrown around like shelter in place, and of course there's social distancing. So that's kind of the
Yeah. So
all-encompassing umbrella term
So
for these.
social distancing, I guess we could start there. I mean, the shelter in place is an American term, so you and I could both sort of talk about what that means for, the US. So social distancing is really, so let's go back for a minute. So the problem with a virus like coronavirus is that there's so many unknowns about, is it one strain or multiple strains? How is it transmitted? Is it by, touching something like metal? How long does it stay on metal if you touch wood or paper or plastics? How long does it stay there? And what are the risks of being infected? And I think there's a lot of debate about that, which doesn't help. So of course you want to protect yourself from that. But then there's been this discussion about whether it's airborne. If it is airborne and it's transmitted by me sneezing, and the microparticles stay in the air long enough that and travel over a certain distance, then social distancing is really about how far away you need to stay away from other people, So I can just say hello to you from across the room, but I don't shake your hand or bump your elbow. So the idea around social distancing was let people just not get so close to each other that they're not sneezing or coughing on each other by accident. That, if there are airborne particles in the air, that you're not accidentally breathing them in. If you're touching things, of course, that's a different matter because if you touch something, you're naturally going to touch your mouth or your eyes or your ears, which is how it enters your body in the first place.
Yeah, and we touch our faces many times an hour. So
Yeah, we do.
one of
Yeah.
the benefits of wearing a mask is that it stops you from doing that.
That or you put glasses on as well because then you won't touch your eyes.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So,
By the way,
and
let's just say to our audience here that this is not medical advice. We're not doctors. Consult your doctor. All standard disclaimers apply. So this is just our personal
for sure.
opinions, and we're not liable for anything. Okay.
No, we're liable for ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, so that's social distancing. Then, I mean, when you get into the various forms of, so here's the other extreme, and then let's go to the other extreme and then go back to the middle. What people don't understand, and this is what I think is probably the most terrifying thing, is what's called medical martial law. I would suggest people just go Google that. You'll find it written down. It's explained on CDC website, explained on other government websites. And medical martial law, what's scary about it is it provides medical professionals, military personnel, doctors, other emergency people to just determine that you may be, ill with the virus, or you may not be, but they're given the right to effectively having you medically arrested. This is not martial law, but it's a little bit terrifying if you think that you could just be taken off of the streets and thrown into a car or a van by a medical professional and taken to quarantine. And of course, we all assume and of course trust that that's where we're actually being taken. But it's quite terrifying by the idea that that could happen.
Yeah.
That is being implemented around the US and around Europe, and it's been done in China and it's been done in Italy. And it's scary because you can see videos all the time of people just being literally taken off the street. Sometimes, like in China, it's because you weren't wearing a mask. In Italy, it's because people are getting into arguments on the street and the police are just taking you away because you're exposing people. And there's a whole range of other variances of that with putting in various curfew times, like you can't be on the street after 8 o'clock at night. But still, it's not martial law. They're not going to shoot you. They might have fines. I know that in countries like in Spain, in Poland, and I think in Italy, there's also fines for being out on the street at certain points in time if you haven't been able to prove that you've gone to doctors' offices or to hospitals or supermarkets or pharmacies. And if you're even in quarantine and you break the quarantine, then you can be given a massive fine. And of course, if you don't have the money, you're thrown in jail. So that's way over on the other extreme, but it's already happening. So people need to be aware of the fact that these laws are being put in place, which can deprive people of their freedoms, but actually it's being done to protect us. So best bet is stay indoors. So now, then rolling back in
Well,
between,
wait a second. So there's an
go on.
extreme version, which we probably don't know the full extent of that's happening in China, probably, right? And that is people going, disappearing, getting pulled off the streets, and then we hear about all these bodies being burned and so forth.
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of videos that have been cut that are out on a website called BitChute. It's a coronavirus series of videos. I'll have to look it up and can put the link on YouTube. But effectively, these were done by a whole underground movement of people who put out whatever they could, and it shows people being boarded in their homes. I mean, literally, houses are being welded shut. You see chains being put on doors. You see people being hauled away. Huge numbers of crematoriums running with bodies being burned 24/7. Satellite imagery of huge numbers of bodies. I mean, if you get sulfur dioxide in the air, that's not coming from burning trees. It's from something else. So there have been some, very light documentaries that have been done, and they're haunting to watch because you just think, you can't invent all this stuff. I mean, some of this stuff is just shocking what you see. So you're right. There is the other extreme, which is what goes on in China stays in China. And I think if there's one thing I want to say here, it's that it's important to recognize that we can't just blindly trust that, the Chinese Communist Party, or what people call the CPC, to be 100% honest with us. I'd like to believe they would be, having seen what we've gone through with other viruses and scares like H1N1, bird flu, and MERS and SARS and what have you. But it's still a communist regime. It's still isolationist in some respects. The government is very much in control of the way they operate and run and do things. They've had a history of doing that. And, for them to say the numbers that they've been saying don't necessarily add up. And the reason I say that is the number of deaths in Italy has been greater than the number in China. And yet the total number of people, if you look at it numerically, doesn't add up correctly to what's, happened in China. So there's something already calculation-wise is off in terms of those numbers. So yeah, I completely agree with you. There's also what we're not being told, and we have to be able to use our own brains and work out what's really going on. I think what probably alarmed me the most, and this was in the very early stages, was when I saw China shutting down full cities, starting with Wuhan, and then moving to Shanghai and Beijing and Shenzhen and on and on. And I thought, why would a country need to shut down populations of 10 million, 17, 20 million, 30 million, whatever people into regions, full lockdown, unable to leave, not enter, not fly in, not fly out, not enter, not leave? And I thought, just look at that and tell me that that makes sense at all on any level. And I thought, it doesn't make sense. So if I just see that as the only fact that's in front of me, I don't care what the data is. The fact that you'd have to shut down an entire city or country to the extreme that they've done just doesn't make sense. I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense. I hope others would recognize something feels off about that.
Right, right. So, yeah, the numbers don't add up, that's for sure. And to get the inside scoop of what's happening, there are some camera phone videos that have managed to make their way out of out of China, because of course WeChat and all the social networking that's very tightly controlled by the regime over there. So it would have to get snuck out in a different way and then make its way onto like one of these Telegram groups or something, which is how I started going down this rabbit hole. Was you sent me that Telegram group chat link. That was frightening and also very educational. But the first time I went in there, one of the first things I saw was it was either a video or an image of a young lady dead in the streets of China.
Yep.
It was very disturbing. Can't unsee that sort of stuff. And I put it down. I could not come back to that Telegram group for days. I ended up doing so because I needed to know. I needed to know what was really going on. But it's really hard to take. Really, really hard to take.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, what you see that's happened in China, I mean, you've got almost a replica of it happening now in Italy, and then Spain, Czech Republic, and Poland were very early to do lockdowns, which I was very surprised by, that, some of the Central European countries took that take. And then all of a sudden it went from that to, the European Union saying, hey, we're locking everything down, where the UK and the US have just been taking it all a bit too kind of casually. And I'm thinking, either, there's a reason why Italy's locked it down and had such an insane amount of continuous numbers of deaths and people still having, more and more people having it, or there's something else. I mean, sometimes you just kind of think, something doesn't make sense. Like, why would countries have to do full shutdowns if this wasn't more serious than what they're telling you? And of course, naturally, you and I have both been in business for a long time, and in my years being in the banking world and being a guy that was providing services to big banks like JP Morgan or Deutsche Bank. I mean, when you're managing an account and you have a few thousand people in there doing work, the first thing you realize is you have to manage things with your client and make sure that you don't tell them all the bad news right away. Sometimes you can fix things in the background. If you go in and say, that we've had a catastrophic failure on one of our servers and something's gone wrong, they're immediately going to go into panic mode and react badly and start giving you a hard time. But in most cases, things can be resolved. So you usually go through some sort of risk management process to figure out, where are we, what's going on, what do we need to do to fix it, what can be fixed, what can't be fixed, and then you go to the client and say, here's the problem, here's the solution. That's kind of normal how do you manage business? I don't see it really being that different in government. I would think, you still have the same risk management and case management scenarios. You identify the problem, you work through it, you have your advisors, you figure out what's going on. And of course, one of the factors that goes into all this is you don't want to create mass panic by telling people things too quickly. But
Right.
then again, we're talking about life and death here, not about an IT system. So, you know, do
Yeah.
we tell people? And if we do, are we going to create mass panic and are we going to create a bigger problem? Or are we actually going to scare them into staying home? And to be honest, none of us know the answer to that because we're only being told what we're told by what the media tells us or what the government tells the media. So it's very hard to work out the truth or the facts on a lot of this stuff. So
Yeah, and
in
just
the absence,
using the media as your guide to make decisions is it's really bad. It's there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, and the messaging is not necessarily so much for your benefit as the population at large, hopefully, but also it's delayed. The stuff that you
yeah,
get on Telegram, for example, or on Twitter will be much faster than what you'd get on the mainstream media. By the way,
for
listeners,
sure.
I will include that Telegram group chat link in the show notes for that, if that's okay, Steve. Is that
Yeah,
cool?
yeah, it's a public group, so not my
Yeah,
group.
yeah, yeah,
I just joined it. Yeah, so it's interesting you say that because I mean, when you look at, trying to get to the right information, you're right, the media is a source, and I believe a lot of them have best interest to share what they can, but are they really doing investigative research and analyzing and really digging deep and asking all the questions and really questioning things? Or are they just reporting what they're given and what they're told to report? And I don't know. Honestly, don't know. But as I said, we all have good analytical minds as human beings. And if we just sit back and we look at, the scale of the problem, I think we can probably on our own, we can already ascertain that something's wrong. If Italy is shut down and the death count keeps climbing, and now we're having similar problems in France, we're having, pretty significant problems in Spain. We're seeing the number of people who are now with coronavirus in New York is greater than in South Korea. I mean, that's an alarming figure to have come from nothing to that in such a short period of time. And, should we be concerned? Yes. Do we believe that coronavirus is not affected by temperature or is affected by temperature? Well, I don't know. So, I mean, Italy's pretty far south. The temperatures are a lot warmer there than they are in New York. And yet, we're still seeing it massively increasing. So, there's lots of things we need to look at, not by what the media says, but just look at what's happening. Go and look at the weather in Sicily or look at the weather in the Lombardy region in Italy and say, well, what's the weather like there? And then how bad is the situation? And sometimes things like that are more valuable than trying to listen to what the media says, where they say, oh, anything over, 70 degrees, it won't be a problem. And then spring and summer will come and the whole thing will die off. I'd love to believe that, but I'd like the data to speak for itself rather than the media to speak for me.
yeah, yeah. So this Telegram group, how did you end up finding it? It's, I guess, run by, I don't know, like an ex-military ops guy or somebody who's kind of in the know on.
Yeah, he seems to be very. So I found it because, well, actually through a crypto group. So a friend of mine called Bruce Porter, who's a fairly well-respected guy, who's let's say he's in the political circles world, but also in the blockchain world, and he runs a group called Washington Elite, and he's also fairly prominent on Telegram, and he runs his own show interviewing various people across the U.S. doing things, it's more crypto blockchain based. And within that group, a few people started popping in there, providing and sharing information that just seemed a little bit hard to take. But they were saying, hey, this information's hard to take, and we know this. We just want to make people aware. And they were, and the thing was, it never felt like it was forcing it down your throat. It didn't feel like it was fake. It felt like genuine concern. And the information that was being given was, as you said, and you've seen for yourself, was quite significant that it made me think, I need to go look at this guy's group directly. So this individual goes by the name Aries and keeps his own personal name out of it. But the more information that he shares, the more you can actually cross-verify that you just stuff that he says that you just think there's just no way that one could say these things. And then they keep coming true weeks later, again and again and again since
So he's
January,
in the know somehow.
somehow in the know.
Yeah.
And he's made reference to a joint U.S. Australian military base that's run in Australia, which he seems to be connected to or is part of or works for. Don't know exactly, but has made reference to satellite imagery and the way that they've been tracking data, and then the way that data was moving. And then he's referred to things about the Chinese Silk Road, which travels, of course, through places like Iran and then Italy. And lo and behold, you say, he's telling you this weeks before, saying, watch out, if this is anything like what we suspect, it could end up in these countries. And then what happens? It hits Iran and hits Italy, and all the disinformation that goes on about how bad it is. And then weeks later, you see on CNN, they have a coverage story about how there's mass graves in Iran. And he's been saying that for 4 weeks already.
Right, right. So
So you're
just
getting cross information or information in advance of what's actually happening, and you're thinking, how can I disavow that information when it's right there in front of me?
yeah. So how well, first of all, for those people who aren't familiar with the New Silk Road, what is that?
What is the New Silk Road?
Yeah. Because not
Well, I
everybody's
mean,
familiar with it. They don't know that China is loaning tons of money to these different countries, to port cities all over the world, so that they can build all this infrastructure, knowing full well that these governments will not have the means to pay China back. And so then
right.
they come in and negotiate really hard terms like 100-year leases and things like that. So they end up owning these ports in these different foreign countries.
It's
And this is
ports
all
and
very,
roads. I mean, they've been building, it's interesting because they've put a lot of money into a number of countries and building, infrastructure and roads that go into Africa and port cities. And so a lot of this is about them investing to create, easier trade and commerce. But of course, it's for personal gain because it's their own country. So of course they would do that. But these roads, they reach their way through Africa, through the Middle East, and through Europe, and it accelerates trade and movement of goods. And of course, as we've all seen, and we've all, I think, come to realize, we all depend on the Chinese manufacturing mega system that we have all collaboratively built by investing our money and asking for more and more products. And they've been smart enough to recognize that and to build it. And now they need to make sure that they can export it more efficiently. So
yeah. And
it's
part of
part of a
this
very,
accelerating the
yeah.
transport of goods is the acceleration of the transport of the virus through these very same
Yeah, it
Silk Road
is.
routes.
It is very much, let's say, call it coincidental. It's been raised as a concern, but no one's ever outright said, "Hey, this is the reason why it's moved to these particular places." It's been more of a, why has it ended up in Iran, first after China? That's a kind of an unusual one because the trade route between China and Iran is not that big compared to the U.S., the U.K., other parts of Europe. Why Italy? It's okay, fine. They have a lot of tourism there, but why Italy? So it's an unknown. I don't know. I think it's rather interesting that it's ended up in these particular countries first. We're of course all assuming that this is a natural virus, and it's, let's say, for our call right now, for our discussion now, Stefan, I'm saying we can assume that it's a natural virus, but then again, there are people out there that say maybe it's not,
That it's a
and
bioweapon, that it
that
was.
it's a bioweapon. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know, and I'm not going to make any claims that it's one way or the other. I'm just saying there's a lot of things that we just don't understand.
Yeah, and what I've read about this, potential of it being from a level 4 biocontainment bioweapons lab in Wuhan, is that there are actually two strains, the L strain and the S strain. L for lethal, S for safe, and the L strain is what leaked out or was released on purpose, who knows, out of that bioweapons lab, made its way into the general population of the citizens of Wuhan, and because it could not be contained, the S strain, the safe strain, was then mass manufactured by the Chinese and then released, sprayed on all these citizens so that that would spread like wildfire. But the problem is, this is all conjecture or whatever. So, this is not all backed up by facts and so forth. So this is take this with a grain of salt. But This is what I'm reading about. And that S strain, the safe strain, is what is getting a lot of people just mildly sick or not sick at all, and then gives them some level of immunity from the L strain, because that's supposedly the strategy to contain this problem of the L strain being out there and making its way not just through Wuhan, but outside of China.
Wow.
So I have done some Googling for L and S strains, and there's been some articles I've been able to read that are not just conspiracy theory websites that are publishing some of this information. So there does seem to be some backup information out there that there are two strains, that one is quite a bit more deadly than the other. And this is very plausible to me. But have you read about this sort of thing, or heard
I mean,
anything about this?
I've actually read, one thing I would say is I don't want to say that it's come from China because I've read enough to suggest that it could be anywhere.
Hmm.
It certainly could create an element of us versus them or a blame and shame culture if we actually want to blame where it came from.
Right.
I mean, it's certainly known that there's a level 4 lab in Wuhan. But equally, I've seen other research suggesting that where you have the most strains is where the virus would have originated from. And so that would lead us to potentially the US. And I've read, other types of reports suggesting that just before the outbreak, there had been some sort of military sort of, competitions and games that were taking place with a number of nations, including US, Chinese, and other. And that there were several US people that got ill just after this, and then the Wuhan outbreak occurred. So that's, a running theory. But then you could also say, what if it was Putin that decided he wanted to create a bioweapon, and because the US and China were already having trade war battles, what a great way to create more strain between them using a viral strain. I mean, you could go down a million different rabbit holes and try to blame and find the reasons why or how it occurred. And I think at this point, because we're at the kind of pandemic stage, that I almost think it's not even worth doing that, because who wants to create a war that comes as a result of any power vacuums that gets formed from government failures? I mean, we're already seeing weaknesses in the Iranian regime because of a number of people have fallen ill with the virus. We've seen U.S. House of Representatives that are sick with the virus. We've seen Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, whose wife has now got the virus, and so now he's quarantined. We've seen the Italian opposition leader sick with coronavirus, and we've seen MPs, members of parliament from the UK with the virus. So to be honest, my bigger worry would be what happens if we start to see governments collapse in different regions that creates power vacuums.
Yeah.
And that to me is a bigger worry than worrying about where the virus came from, because I'd rather we try to work together as a global society to try to keep each other safe and informed and make sure we have goods available to each other. Easy to go down rabbit holes personally. This is my personal point of view. I mean, about,
I agree with you. I do. And
you know,
the divisiveness is not what we need right now. The blame and
no,
finger pointing. We need to all come together, because this is a global problem. This is all of humanity needing to come together in ways that we haven't for maybe hundreds of years. So
yeah,
let's go back to this definition of self-isolation, self-quarantine, and
sure,
shelter in place. So
yeah.
those are all concepts that fall under the umbrella of social distancing, which we already talked about. So can you differentiate those three terms: self-quarantine, self-isolation, and shelter in place? And you're calling what you're doing as self-quarantine, correct?
I've never thought about the difference between self-quarantine and self-isolation, because I suppose I'm doing both. I mean, did you have in mind what the difference between them is?
Well, I read on one website that self-quarantine is if you believe that you either have the virus or you've been
Oh, I
exposed to the
see.
virus,
Right.
whereas
Okay.
self-isolation is you're just avoiding potential exposure,
Right.
is my
Then I would
understanding.
call it
But
self. Yeah, that's a fair. I never really thought about it, to be honest, because in the early stages, people just said, we're asking everybody to quarantine themselves, as full nations go, or as far as Europe goes, they're talking about lockdowns and asking everybody to quarantine themselves. So I just use the term broadly. But
Gotcha.
you're
Okay.
right. I mean, we chose as a family to self-isolate several weeks before Europe went through its own form of European lockdown. I mean, every country's done some different things. We used Italy as our gauge, and when we saw things expanding there at the rate it was expanding, we self-determined that we would just go into self-isolation before any schools were shut down in our area because we felt that it'd be wiser to do so. So
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, self-quarantine would be those people who are, you know, where one person or several people are suspected of having the virus or have been told they have it and they need to self-quarantine until it's all clear for them. We're certainly not in that place.
Gotcha.
We
Yep. Yep.
just we've just chosen to self-isolate
Just
because we did not
proactively
want to take
because
the
you
risk.
saw the writing
Yeah,
on the wall.
yeah. And before we self-isolated, we'd already started collecting goods and a range of things from food to any medicines to any prescription drugs that we might need. In fact, the first thing we bought were. It's funny because you don't think about this, but we have, you have kids, and I know you've got a child, and we've got two young kids,
Yeah.
and the first thing you realize is they need to eat, but they also grow, and they grow like little weeds. So, you know, so the first thing we looked at was we said, okay, well, we've got two boys and they're just growing like exponentially right now. So we thought, what happens if we actually were locked in for 3 months or 6 months? What would we do? I mean, first thing you would find is they wouldn't have shoes to wear. They'd outgrow their clothes. Then what would we put them in? So the first thing we did back in January was we said, we'll take a little bit of the money we've saved aside from our work over the last few months, and we're just going to buy some extra clothes that are a few sizes bigger. And because I've got two sons, it made it a little easier because we always know that my older ones' clothes can fit on my younger ones at some point anyway. And then whilst we were at it, we went ahead and did the same thing and got shoes. So that was kind of our first, stepping stone into the kind of self-isolation world. And once we'd done that, we went out and just bought bulk of beans and rice and various things that are dry, pastas and couscous and whatever we could think of, and then canned vegetables and canned fruits and lots of tomato paste, cans of tomatoes, flour, because flour is great. If you have the right kind of flour, you can make your own bread. So we make daily bread every day. Having staple things like flour, you can get UHT milk rather than normal milk. I know I've gone off path a little bit here on the isolation thing, but
No,
it's
this
good
is
for
great
people to
stuff. We
understand.
needed to get back to this and go through all the
Yeah,
different
so
kinds of goods you need to have on hand. And you think 3 to 6 months is what you need to plan for?
I mean, we planned for originally about a month, and then we saw how things were getting worse and worse in Italy, and how people were delaying and delaying doing things. So we then went for kind of expanding it to about 2 months, and now we've expanded it to someplace between 3 and 6. I mean, I don't exactly know how long all the food would go, but it certainly will go for a while. And we have some pretty big bags of pasta and some pretty big bags of rice. We've got, two big bags of rice. And if you look at a bag of rice, that's like a 20-kilo bag, which is about 45 pounds roughly. So if you have 100 pounds or 90 pounds of rice, you can imagine that'll go for a long while. So dried goods are really important. But then when you think about things like milk and eggs, well, eggs are only going to last about 4 weeks roughly if they're in the fridge, maybe a bit longer, maybe not.
Yep. Oh, by the
Um,
way, a way to tell if your eggs are bad is to see if
oh
they
yeah, it's a good one.
float. Yeah.
Yeah,
So just put it in some water and see if it floats. If it floats, it's bad.
yeah, yeah, that's a good one. And yeah, so we started just collecting things that we thought, things we could use for being able to get by. And so we've accepted the fact that meat is not going to be a stable part of our diet. So you can replace proteins with things like beans. You can make hummus with chickpeas or garbanzo beans. You can make other forms of things like chili if you have tomato and you have a bit of Worcester sauce and you have sugar and you have chili and you have kidney beans and other white beans. So you can make so many things you can still make as long as you've got a big spice rack and lots of things like, beans, rice, fruits and vegetables that are canned or frozen, then you should be in a better place. And that was kind of our starting foundation, was just to make sure we had enough in that sense. And then milk, you can get UHT milk, which is basically milk that doesn't have to be refrigerated. So you can get it in boxes and
Yeah, we got lots of boxes of like oat milk and almond milk
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. Yep.
Yeah, so for people who want to have, normal milk or lactose-free milk, you can do that as well.
Yeah.
But then, of course, almond, oat, coconut, coconut rice, rice milk are all possible. And if you just, work out how much you're using per week, then you can pretty much just get like a couple of, containers or, cartons of it, and you'll have enough that could last you easily for a couple months because it depends how much you consume. And with kids and cereal, of course, that's our big killer. Making bread is easy. You don't need a bread maker. You just need a way to make sure you have dry yeast and you can mix it with flour, with bread flour, some sugar, some oil, and that's pretty much the main ingredients, a bit of salt. And, so if you have your flour, if you have your sugar, if you have some salt and you'll have water, then you've got all the basics to make bread every day. And, you can also make your own jams by just making your own preserves if you can't get access to it. But that, of course, means buying fruit. So fruits and vegetables that are fresh is always going to be the hardest thing. And then, you go from there to all the other things you need to have, which are just medical things that are, you think ears, nose, throat. So you want to be able to take care of your eyes, eye drops. You want to be able to, in case your eyes get dry or something like that, or if you get pollens or allergies in the springtime, you want to make sure you have the ability to take care of yourself that way. Cough medicines. If you get a fever, or not feeling well, or you have an ache, or if you pull a muscle, because if you're working in your house doing things, you still might slip and fall or injure yourself. So you want to have all the basics, band-aids and hydrogen peroxide so you can disinfect a wound if it happens, or you're cutting vegetables or cutting meat or cutting anything with a knife, you can still injure yourself. So, just assume that it's always good to have all the basic stuff or, first aid type stuff. And then you go a little bit further and you think, well, what happens if the power goes out? What about electricity? What about running water? That kind of stuff. Well, that hasn't been a problem in China. So I kind of assumed if it didn't happen in China, it'll probably be okay everywhere else. But that being said, I mean, there's always these ideas about what if I have to light a fire? So how many ways can you light a fire? Well, you can use matches, you can use lighters, you can use waterproof ways of lighting matches so that you can get different things, candles. And then you can start thinking about like how you keep a room clean or disinfected. So you can ozonate a room by getting a little ozonator, which just you close the room, run the machine, it kicks out this ozone air into the room and it disinfects the whole room and kills off everything in the room, and the room smells amazingly fresh afterwards. It's also really good for keeping fresh fruits and vegetables going. UV lights or UV wands for waving them over fruits and vegetables or anything else so that you can kill off any sort of bacteria and viruses that you might have been exposed to. And then things like hand sanitizers, toilet paper, paper towels, paper rolls and stuff you'll typically run out of earlier, sooner. All your washing liquids, having a good supply of that. Flashlights can't hurt. I mean, where is it? I don't have it here, do I? I have oh yeah, I do. I got these, I'll just show you this. This is really cool. So I got one of these lights here oops, it's,
Oh, that's cool. It's
yeah,
like you're
just
ready
goes
to
on your
go in
head
the
like that.
caves.
Yeah, exactly. For spelunking. But I got it because I thought, what if I have to walk out of my house in the evening? If I, you don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people in the States I've been seeing like buying guns and stuff like that, which is worrying. But I
Oh
thought,
my
I
God,
have my
yes, it
dogs.
is. They're selling out everywhere, and huge lines at the gun shops.
Yeah. I mean, in Europe, you don't have access to guns freely like that. So that makes me feel a little better. And I have dogs. So those are my alarms. And they can be pretty mean and ferocious if they think someone's trying to enter. So which is great, but they're still very nice, sweet dogs, which is I'm happy about. But needless to say, you might want to go and investigate what's going on. I mean, we've had, hedgehogs coming through our garden and the dogs go crazy because there's a hedgehog. So fine. So having a little headlamp like that means you have your hands free and you can handle whatever situations there are in front of you. And it might just be nothing, but at least you can walk around with a really bright light, and there's not much that's going to escape a light that's bright.
So
Um,
what if you don't have a dog and you don't have a gun? Are there weapons that you should have on hand?
ooh, well, that's an interesting question because it's not something that I like to talk about a lot because I don't like to think about it.
But
I
we're having to
mean,
think about things that we really don't want to think about here, right? So
yeah, I know. I mean,
so like
does
a
it hurt to have a pair
taser
of
or
handcuffs in your house? Tasers, handcuffs, baseball bats, BB guns. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can use. Oh, here's a good one, and this is something that I
Mace.
learned some years ago. Mace, but here's a better one. Take some coins and just stick them in a sock because the weight of those coins inside of a sock, you're not going to. I mean, you just bang hit someone with that. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt a lot. And that's probably more damaging than a baseball bat in some respects because it's metal
Hmm.
and it's in a sock. So no one's going to take you seriously if you're walking around with a sock in your hand and then you just clock them with a sock and then it's like bang, they're down. So sometimes look for the things that you've got and don't go out and buy something. If you can defend yourself by just dumping a bunch of coins in a sock, isn't that a better way to defend yourself than trying to do it with guns and weapons? At
Especially
the
if
end of the
you've
day,
never shot a gun before, and
yeah, if you've
the,
never shot a gun, even worse. You know,
uh,
um, I mean, if you're going to be pointing a gun at someone who knows how to use a gun, your chances of success on that are not going to be very good.
mm,
So I honestly hope we don't degrade to the point where things like civil unrest starts occurring. Bars on windows, if you can put bars on your windows, I mean, that's not unheard of as long as you have a way to unlatch them for fire related problems. But if you have a way to prevent people from entering your property, I would always err on the side of make your house more safe and more protected and make sure the locks are solid and secured and make sure you lock your house every day. That's going to be worth more than trying to have weapons in your house because you're going to mistake something. And people with fear and panic will always make mistakes. And that's just normal. When we're under stressful situations, it's easier to make mistakes by being in a panic situation.
yeah.
So I would rather try to just find things I can use in my own house that'll be useful. So yeah, if you don't have dogs, then other things that are noise that will, help you are always useful.
Yeah.
Noise and, you know,
So now with a taser, you can't use that multiple times. If you shoot and hit somebody, and then there are three attackers that are entering
oh, right.
your
That's
home,
not going to do much for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
you would need three tasers. But one thing that is interesting about a taser is that it can call the police upon firing, if because it's Bluetooth connected, and if your phone is nearby and you have the Noonlight app installed, that Noonlight app will call the police as soon as the device has been fired. You can also
Yeah.
use that app just as a way to call the police just by hitting the button. So if you're in an unsafe area, you can have your finger on the button on this app, and then if you let go, then it immediately calls the police, something like that.
Yeah. I think my only comment about that is, if we really ended up in a situation where you're having a civil unrest style problem,
Yeah, the police are going
then
to be busy.
yeah, you're not going to get the police coming around. And let's hope that we are smart enough that we can help each other as neighbors and protect each other rather than run and hide if something does go wrong. And that if you're able to secure your home properly, then it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, hopefully. All right.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I don't think I've reached the point of that level of concern yet, but I certainly see the amount of guns being purchased in the States, and that does worry me.
Well, my wife Orion spotted a guy casing our place, and he was checking out our windows. He didn't know that she spotted him out the window because it's hard to see in because of the type of windows we have.
That is scary.
And yeah, the guy looked super sketchy, and he made a call while he was casing our place, and he was looking at other houses too in the neighborhood.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not good.
No,
Wow.
this
Well, you need to
this
take.
this is coming. Like this is when people start running out of food and supplies and so forth, because the whole supply chain is going to fall apart. It can't
Yeah.
continue for months without the workers all coming in to the factories, without the people in the retail shops and the like. Sure, there's going to be some critical infrastructure that will still stay running because they have to, like the
Yeah.
medical, the healthcare system. but a lot of things that are currently considered essential businesses that we're accustomed to and spoiled by may stop working, or they just kind of will dry up, and it's already taking longer than we're used to get Amazon deliveries, right? This guarantee of 2 day prime shipping and da 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 da. Like that's kind of out the window already.
Wow. Yeah, the other thing too is if you look at just go online and look at the port of LA because it's online and they have cameras showing it, and what you'll see is how few containers are sitting there right now. And normally the port of LA has container upon container that takes you to 6 or 8 stories or higher, buildings. I mean, they're just massively tall, it's a mini skyscraper village of containers all over the place. And right now you just see these huge empty patches where there's just nothing. And, that is a supply chain problem that's already occurred. And let's hope that a lot of that is not that it's not all China, but the fact is that with now Europe also being in a bit of a lockdown, that doesn't help. But the port of LA would be coming from Asia.
Yeah.
So you look at that and you say, well, so how much of stuff is not coming from Asia, and when is it coming, and how much of that is related to food and supplies that are necessary right now for people that are in their homes?
Right.
And if it's not, great. If it's televisions, I think we can live without extra television sets right now.
But if you're trying to find some of your favorite Italian pasta, good luck, right? Because
Yeah, you're
that's going to
probably
start
not going to
drying
see
up
much.
if it hasn't already.
Yeah, exactly. That's certainly, so I don't know how much of that's manufactured in each of the respective countries, but certainly I know most countries have their own, companies that produce some goods, and some things are imported, exported. So you might find that your favorite of whatever it is may not necessarily come for a while, but hopefully each country has the ability to supply what it needs to, at least short term. But, global trade is definitely halted to a large degree. And that is scary because if you start looking at the ports online and you realize how much movement of goods is actually not occurring now, that probably worries me more because I don't know how long it'll be until supermarkets really can't supply stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I saw
I
a
just don't know
video.
because we don't. Yeah.
Well, I saw a video that was on Live Leaks. I think it was this lady was taking like a surreptitious camera phone video. She was like a truck driver or something, and she was showing how the port was practically empty. Very few containers. Usually
Yes.
there's stacks upon stacks upon stacks of these containers. There's nothing. Almost
Yeah.
nothing there. And she's like, I've never seen anything like this. This is very, very worrying. And that was weeks ago that she took that video. So things are going to start coming to like a screeching halt because the entire world is essentially closed for business for weeks, maybe months, probably months. I mean, if you look at there's a site called covidactnow.org that's trying to convince all the legislature and like the different governors, the heads of executive branches to take fast action. And every day that there's a delay in locking everything down, forcing us to stay in our homes, many, many more people are going to die. So that it shows these different curves of the spread of the virus depending on when they act and bring
Yeah.
in, like, as you said, medical martial law. It's pretty frightening. So we need
Yeah. I mean,
to
the
plan for
difficulty that I
this.
also, yeah, the difficulty I find with a lot of this is that there is misinformation about, the death being more for people who are with previous medical conditions and the elderly, because time and again we've seen cases where that's not true and younger people have died. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing is that I think where the biggest problem is that because it's a respiratory illness that affects our breathing and the amount of equipment physically available in the hospitals is limited, I think the biggest problem with the virus isn't so much the fact that it would necessarily kill everybody normally. It's the fact that our hospitals globally are just not equipped for the volume of people that need respiratory care.
Right.
And that's where everything just falls apart and breaks. And that's what makes it scarier is the fact that you just can't get the medical care you need when you need it. That plus doctors and hospitals are just not equipped with the amount of masks and equipment that's needed to take care of themselves. And that's why you've seen so many doctors falling ill as well. They don't have the masks. It's like I've seen something in the UK where test the person. If they turn out to be positive for coronavirus, then we'll give you a mask to take care of that person afterwards.
Yeah. By then they've
Like,
spread it all over the
didn't
place.
I just expose myself? But I mean, telling people not to wear masks is also one of the funniest things I've seen. And I mean, look, it's pretty logical. The reason people have been saying that is simply because there isn't enough of it to go around. And if you tell everybody to go buy a mask, you'll create a run on the masks.
Yeah. Well, there's
Yeah.
already been a run on the mask, but there will be mass panic. I don't have masks. We're all gonna die. Oh my God, let's riot and loot and create all this havoc. So
Yeah, and that's the thing we don't want to have is we don't want panic. We want to prepare. And that's why I ended up going to the prepper mentality so I wouldn't feel myself in panic mode because I don't want to be a panicker. I would rather be a prepper.
yeah, yeah. So something I learned that's really important when you're telling somebody who's going through shock or going through a really hard time, do not say don't panic because it's their reptilian brain that you're speaking to, their amygdala, which is in fight or flight, and they're not hearing the little nuances like the word don't. All they heard was the word panic, and of course they are going to get into more of a panic because you just told them to don't panic. Instead, tell them remain calm. So the presupposition, meaning
That's
that
great. Yeah.
you already all are calm, even if they're losing it. And then calm is that primary keyword that they're focusing on instead of the word panic and don't panic. So that is like an NLP, neuro linguistic programming technique. But the thing about masks that I want to mention is there's a lot of confusion around surgical masks. Are those sufficient, or do you need N95 masks, or what's the difference between that and like KN95 and so forth? So what do you tell people about the masks?
Get an FFP1, not an FFP 2 or 3. So basically, N95s are FFP2s, and those are not actually deemed to be sufficient for blocking coronavirus. So it is funny that a lot of people think N95 is the right mask to get. But what you actually need is what's referred to as an N99 or an N100, which is got a much finer material, and the respirator is for catching even smaller particles. And the research that was done early on that identified that the virus is a very, very small microparticle suggested that the N95s may not be sufficient. So I have been surprised that for a very long time, everyone's been talking about, get yourself an N95. And I always thought, I don't quite understand that because it's not really sufficient. So different terminology, different people use. But I mean, at the end of the day, N99 or N100 is basically what people need to be getting in actuality. N95s are still going to protect you from quite a lot, and it's probably going to be sufficient in many cases, but
It's better than not having one.
it's better than not having one, and that's generally what people are getting access to. But I just did early research and identified that that wasn't sufficient. So what I have is a small, and I mean small, very small stockpile of masks, but only because if I needed to go out for even a couple of hours and take care of something, like try to get some fruits and vegetables or something like that, then I might leave the house, go for a couple of hours and come back. And I don't want to take any risks. So that's where I would use a mask like that. But then I'll try, as we talked about earlier, reuse the mask, sterilize the mask, and, reseal it so I can use it a couple of times if at all possible. If I only had N95s, yes, I'd still go out, and yes, I would still take a risk because having fruits and vegetables is probably more important than over worrying or panicking,
Yeah.
because a lot of these masks are already there to protect you. If you can protect your eyes as well, protect your eyes.
And that's with what? With goggles or just
Goggles,
glasses?
glasses, sunglasses. You can also put for your ears. You can put little, ear muffs on your ears. You can put the little cap on your head and block your ears that way. You could wear The little the little things you stick in your ears when you want to, like earbuds, when you want to sleep or you want to have like no sound. So anything that just blocks stuff going into your ears is also recommended by some doctors, because the three entry points are your eyes, your ears, and your nose, your mouth. Four, actually. So who can
Gotcha.
count? Five if you count two eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, most people aren't protecting their ears, and to be honest, the bigger problem with ears is more about if you're scratching your ear and you touch something with your hands, and then you stick your hand in your ear. That's where you'd have a bigger problem for ears. But sneezing, and then someone sneezing, and the particles are in the air, and they can go into your eyes, and you wouldn't feel it, but of course they're microparticles. That could be how you get infected. So for example, I could wear my reading glasses, but I wouldn't go walking around wearing my reading glasses because I wouldn't be able to see anything when I'm walking around. But that would probably be more than sufficient in most cases. But people are taking things to all sorts of crazy, extremes, so partially for fun and partially because they're just being extreme. To be honest, my wife and I were just being cautious,
Yeah.
and we're being careful. Social distance first, and then making sure we have a mask and wearing glasses so that we're protecting ourselves the best we can. A
Yeah.
pair of sunglasses and a mask, and you look like Darth Vader. That's kind of cool.
Well, hopefully you're indoors and away from people, so you're not getting exposed. But this is if you have
No,
to
of
go
course. I
out.
mean, if we had to leave the house, I'm using it as an example that that's what we would do. Yeah.
Right, right. And one of the really valuable documents that I got from being in that Telegram group is the coronavirus hygiene Google Doc that I don't know who created that, but that was really, really helpful to understand all the different things that you should be doing. Like to
Yeah.
to just think I'll just wash my hands after I go get gas is a real mistake. You need to be wearing gloves, and you really shouldn't be reusing the same gloves over and over again,
Yeah.
if at all possible. So I'll share in the show notes that coronavirus hygiene Google Doc, and also there's another document I got from the group, which is a coronavirus supply survival guide. And that's where you think, oh gosh, I didn't think of that, and I didn't think of that, and that, and that, and that. There's
Is the
so many
survival
things.
guide the one where it was all the things that they could buy that was
Yeah,
in that group? Yeah. So yeah.
yeah, that's
Just to, I want to restate one thing too. So it's FFP3 is the N99 or the N100 masks that you need to look for. I might have misspoken earlier, so I want to make sure I restated that
okay. Got
that it
it.
is an FFP3 that's really, the highest end of the masks. But if you have an FFP2, those are fine. I mean, they're generally good enough for most people anyway.
Yeah. So ideally, you want to get FFP3. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us who are in California, Governor Newsom has stated we have to stay in our homes. I forget the terminology. There's all these terminologies like shelter in place, stay at home, etc. So we have to stay at home, with the exception of going out for essentials, going to the grocery store, going to get medical care, that sort of thing. And what is currently allowed, but I'm guessing it's going to be tightened, is you are allowed to go outside to exercise. So you could go to a state park or local park and just keep your distance, minimum 6 feet social distancing from anybody else, and that you can still get that exercise, still go hiking or running or what have you, for now.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very
In
interesting.
California, yeah, that's on the covid19.ca.gov website that they are allowing that, but I can't imagine that's going to continue for very long.
Wow. Well, let's get out and go for a run while we can, just 6 feet apart.
Hey, well, you're not in California, so
No,
that
too far.
yeah, that doesn't give you carte blanche to go and hang out with people and organize play dates with your mommy groups and that sort of thing in the local park. Definitely stay away from people.
Oh my God, I read something today. There was a woman that posted that she wanted to have a play date with her friends to give all the kids exposure to COVID-19 because she figured it was like the chicken pox.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. So then we won't have to deal with in the future. Crazy. Oh, that just because you have it once doesn't mean that you are immune. I saw articles like there was this Japanese guy who was on the Diamond Princess, I think, and then he got
Yeah.
better after getting very, very ill, and then he got it again and had to get
Was it a relapse or he actually
rehospitalized.
got it again?
He got it again.
Really? So I know there's been a lot of cases of relapse, but I hadn't heard of one actually having it twice.
Yeah. So I'll put a
Oh
link to
God,
that in the show notes.
that's
That
horrible.
particular article. Yeah, it was on NHK, the NHK World Japan News.
Yeah, Japanese
Japanese
news. Yeah.
man test positive second time. Yeah. So I'll include that
God.
in the show notes.
The
Oh my
thing that
God.
worries me most about this disease is the fact that it does damage to your lungs and
And
reduces
your
lung
heart.
capacity
And your
and your
heart.
heart. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just getting it and getting through it doesn't mean that you aren't permanently disabled to some degree. Yeah,
Oh, that's horrible.
yeah. So what can
I
we
just
tell
want
people
people to
that
be
will
safe.
end this episode on a positive note so that they can remain hopeful that we will get this, that this too shall pass.
Well, I mean, look, there's been a virus of some pandemic about every 100 years, and we've always come out the other side of it. Um, I think human beings are very resilient
Yeah,
when it comes to adversity. We've been through world wars, and during those world wars, you and I didn't experience them firsthand, but our grandparents or people, in older generations have.
yeah,
And we've come out the other side of those things. And there was the Spanish flu during World War I, and we've come out the other side of both of those things. Um, I grew up during the era of nuclear war fear all the time of, U.S. versus Russia and what's going to happen and all that. And we don't talk about that anymore either. So, I think these things are always going to happen in the world that we live in, and they're going to come and they're going to go. I think the downside, of course, as we know, is the risks and dangers of our health, and also there's a lot of issues with economy, jobs, and I think that in some respects, if you can risk being home instead of being out, then you can also do a lot of other things that are great for yourself. I mean, pursue other things of interest. You can go online and you can learn things on YouTube that you've never had time to learn. You can read books. You can read
yeah.
my book. You can, or your book. I mean, we've both written books. So there's a lot that you can do. I've had the opportunity to spend so much time with my children that I never had before. Yes, I have to do the homeschooling now because the schools are closed, so I have to take responsibility for that. So that's a challenge, but it's also interesting to actually be able to connect with my kids, spend more time with them. I get to spend more time with my wife doing things that we've been wanting to do and not had time to do because we're home all the time.
Yeah.
Um, we've created some different rules or boundaries. So I'd say, for people who are married that are wondering how do you not drive each other crazy, define some boundaries around, hey, I'm a guy, I want some guy time. I'm going to play my Xbox, or I'm going to do some, if I have a garden or a place like a front of my house, if I can play basketball and shoot hoop, I'll shoot hoop. Whatever it is, let guy does what guy wants to do, and let woman do whatever she wants to do. Give each other space to do your own thing.
Yeah.
Have some time where you get together as a family and do fun things together. So I'll give a few examples of fun things we've done. We had Upside Down Day. Um, Upside Down Day was basically that we weren't going to do anything in the normal order. So the kids got up, and the first thing they did was they got to have snacks and watch cartoons for breakfast. Then I had some turkey in the freezer, so I made us a Thanksgiving dinner for basically for like a brunch,
Hmm.
mashed potatoes, turkey, whatever. And then we had breakfast around dinner time. So the whole day was completely upside down. But the kids are like, so are we going to do upside down day every Saturday then? Because it was kind of fun.
Oh, that's
Um,
cute.
so that's one thing.
Also,
Games,
self care. So
yeah.
having time to do a bubble bath if you've got a tub, or to, I mean, that's not my thing, but painting your nails also not my thing. But Orion, my wife, she took some time to paint her nails, and
Or she could just paint your nails because maybe she finds that therapeutic. And then you can have some time together where you're talking and she's painting.
Sure, yeah, like okay.
It can be
Um,
removed afterwards, you know that.
that's funny. Anyway, so she was
So
very happy to have her nails painted. She normally goes to go get a manicure pedicure, but that's out of the that's out of the question now. So being able
yeah,
to take the time and do that really helpful. Take time for self care and
that's it.
also
And make a routine.
yeah, that's great.
Get into a routine. So your normal routine is get up in the morning, go to work, come home, get the kids out of the house, whatever. Create different routines that you can get into patterns for. Let the weekends be weekends with sleep-ins and all the rest, but let the week be structured a little bit more where you actually force yourself out of bed. If you're working and you can work from home, well then certainly stay in that work focus and mentality of get up, work from 9 till 5, have your lunch break. If your kids are home with you now, of course, have lunch with your kids. Of course, there's more things going on, but routine helps because it gives you a sense of purpose. And then throw in fun things that you've been wanting to do with, learn magic or Magic the Gathering or or whatever, taekwondo on YouTube, or go get a Series 7 license or something so you can become a financial advisor. I mean, there's no stopping the number of things you can come up with and do to
Yep.
self-educate and learn and grow
Yep.
in these times of
Every
adversity. If
night
you're
could be game night, right?
Every night could be a game. We could have poker online. I mean, why not? We've got to find an app that'll do that for us, but we could have some fun and we could transfer Bitcoin to each other for whoever the winner is.
I I don't know poker well enough, so I'm going to pass on that one.
Blackjack is just fun, but you get my point. There's
Yeah,
lots of
yeah,
things you can do. And the other thing is you can have social parties with your friends using Zoom or Skype or whatever too. So, I mean, this is a great opportunity to connect with people that you've not been able to connect with for a while or you got
yeah.
too busy. Pick up the phone and call someone you haven't had a chance to talk to in a while and just reconnect.
Yeah, do
Because if
that
you're
every
sitting at home,
day. Like find somebody
yeah,
new that you have not spoken to for a long time. All this idea of like, oh, it's been so long, this family member, I've fallen out of touch with them. It's kind of awkward to give them a call now. All that's, fallen by the wayside because we're all in crisis mode. So just check in on them. It's like, oh, I haven't spoken to this relative for 5 years. How embarrassing. No, it's not anymore
that's
because
right.
we're all one big family right now. Some other things that bring us hope, like I've read some things about chloroquine, which is an anti-malaria medicine that seems to have some positive effect on people who are who have the virus and are suffering from COVID-19. There's there's another thing I want to mention. You mentioned, Steve,
Yeah.
we're resilient as a species. I would take that even a step further. There's a book that it's called Anti-Fragile. It's by the same author of The Black Swan, so Nicholas Taleb, and he describes anti-fragile as a step beyond resilient, where if you're resilient, you just can bounce back against, or you can weather the storm. But if you're anti-fragile, you actually need those pressures and stressors to thrive and evolve. It's like our immune system is anti-fragile. It's not just resilient. We'd all be dead if we just merely had a resilient immune system. Mother Nature is anti-fragile. Economic systems, like the ones that we've been living through, are anti-fragile. So if you think of yourself as anti-fragile and not just resilient, that will give you almost like a mental superpower.
No, it's
And
so cool. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so take this to another level and apply that concept of anti-fragile not just to your immune system, but to your psychology as well. Yeah,
Yeah. And I will add one thing to that as well is that a healthy mind gives you a healthy body.
yeah,
um, because it's very easy to start. And I'll tell you from experience. I mean, being locked at home and not being able to leave the confines of the house suddenly feels. There are days where I woke up at the beginning feeling stressed or feeling, I wouldn't say depressed, but felt uneasy, like trapped. And that's no different than being in a crappy job and feeling trapped in my job and waking up in the morning in a sweat going, oh, got to get out of this job. It's that same feeling. So you have to shift the mindset. So how do you shift the mindset is you start to find ways to make a positive experience for yourself, because if you can create a positive environment, you won't get ill generally. It creates a stronger immune system. It creates a stronger mindset for yourself. And that's also like a superhuman power of just being in a positive mindset. If you're feeling down, call a friend, mastermind with some people, talk through it together, create support groups if you're feeling down. But don't use those groups to create negative environments. Create positive environments with positive outcomes, actionable things that you can do, that you can monitor. So don't ever feel like because you're stuck at home for 2 or 3 weeks, which could be 2 or 3 months, that or could be longer, that we have to sink into any forms of depression. Find things that you can do to uplift your spirit, because the more positive energy and feeling you have, the more that it makes getting through the day easier, especially if you're not able to leave the house. And the furthest you might be able to go might be a balcony, or might not even be a balcony. You might just have a house or an apartment. So this really calls out to everybody that just find ways to create, use different rooms for different things, so that you can go to a safe room where you feel like that's your, like you said, take a bath, or go into your bedroom and that's a place where you only sleep. And then when you're in the living room, it's a place where you do other fun things. So try to find ways to create environments that create positivity. And if you're feeling down in one room, get up and move to another room, because it changes the mindset when you move.
Yeah, yeah. So you got to feed the lightness within you and not the darkness. And the darkness that's out there is it's undeniable, but we don't have to focus on it. If we focus
Yeah.
on it, we just create more of it. Whereas if we focus on the light and focus on revealing light in every interaction, before I get on a podcast episode to do the recording, or if I am going to get on a client Zoom call or something, I'm always thinking about how am I going to reveal light in this interaction. There's this old Cherokee bit of wisdom, the tale of the two wolves. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay, so here, I'll read this to you. One evening,
Cool.
an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, doubt, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, forgiveness, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed."
Huh. Yeah. Interesting.
Right? So focus on the light. And,
Try
everything.
meditating as well. A lot of people don't meditate or don't understand the benefits of it, but there's tons of great meditation stuff you can find on YouTube that will help you to find your inner peace and your inner self. And here's another really interesting, cool thing that I discovered over the last few weeks. You can listen to music that's at 432 frequency. Um, and 432 in particular has a certain vibration or reverberation, which is probably the most natural frequency that there is. There's been tons and tons of research done about this frequency versus 440, which is what most music is made in. And 432 actually creates really beautiful patterns if you put, a vibration of 432 with sand, and the sand will form a beautiful pattern, where if it's 440, it's a little bit of a muddled pattern. So what I've been doing is I've been recently experimenting by using 432 to put my kids to sleep, by using 432 frequency. And oh my God, they go to sleep so quickly now. And I can only just say that I was using other music and to put them to sleep, like, just to relax them. That sort of meditation music, just because they liked the sounds of the tones. And when I switched from 440 to 432, it was like a miracle music.
Oh, that's
No
awesome.
joke.
432
That's
hertz.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And
Yeah,
and you're
and
also meditating too, right? You've been
I
meditating for a
started
while.
meditating last summer. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, it helps you to really just kind of get out of your own head and just to take in the energies around you, and just kind of go into a mode of serenity where you don't have to think about the positives or the negatives or anything. Try to just create a blank slate where there's lots of online meditation stuff where they'll do guided meditation and help you. I mean, I've gone to the point where I can literally go into a point of like I'm not thinking about my wife or my kids or work or anything, and I just let my mind float as if you were floating in the ocean, just floating there, just freely floating. And it's very therapeutic because it just gives you some time to escape everything and let your mind take you where it takes you.
Yeah. By
And
the way, I have
sometimes you
a
have
couple of great
insights.
episodes. I have multiple episodes on meditation. Ariel Garten, who's the co-founder of Interaxon, creates the Muse meditation device that the wearable device. So that's
Yep.
a great episode. I've had Sanjay Sabnani on. So I've also had Oneness Monk Douglas Bentley on the podcast. So those are just a few great episodes on meditation to check out. I have multiple other ones, and yeah, just reconnecting with your inner being and staying connected with your inner being is so important. If you don't quiet your mind chatter, how are you going to do that? It's going to be so much harder. So definitely meditate and work to elevate your consciousness and just operate at a higher vibration. You'll affect
Yeah,
the people
that's
around
it.
you. If you're in self isolation with your family, that will affect them positively. It will affect the field around you. Even if you're by yourself, the field will be better because you are elevating your consciousness. And if you want to get a little woo woo, I recommend Akashic Records readings. This is really spooky, kind of weird, but my wife Orion had an Akashic Records reading. The lady's amazing. I've had multiple readings from her as well. I'll include a link in the show notes as well. It's bodyenergyconnection.com. But so Anne Marie is the person who does the readings. She was channeling the records holders, records people who or entities or whatever, and she was answering one of Orion's questions around, or the records keepers were answering the questions through Anne Marie. I know it sounds pretty woo woo, but it was about our nanny. The question was about our nanny. I don't remember what she said exactly was the question she asked about our nanny. But the records keepers said that something's going to shift in March, and that nanny will no longer be your nanny.
Woo.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And here we are.
And here we are. Like, this
And you
is
don't have your nanny anymore because of the situation.
right. So we
Wow.
we sent her home about a week early before all the stay safe at home orders and all that. And so we thought, oh well, we just need to take proactive action here. It's probably just going to be a short-term situation. It really hadn't sunk in yet. But we said, we really shouldn't be bringing you back in for this next week. So can you, just not come? Which was heartbreaking to say. And then in reflection, Orion's like, oh my God, this was the records keepers telling us that something's going to shift. Uh,
That's so crazy.
yeah. Well, you've had some kind of
Yeah, I've had some of
crazy
my own
stuff.
really weird. Yeah, I did. I started meditating like more seriously last June in June 2019, and I started having these sort of I think probably around September, October, these sort of dark versus light, and the dark. It was like I could almost imagine floating in space, and I would see this just vastness, a vast darkness, sort of consuming an area of space, and then see this kind of line with light on the other side of it. And I was always being confronted with the fact that they were both there, but the expansion of darkness was coming and was getting bigger, and it was scary. And I was getting these sensations that there was something dark and terrible coming. And I thought, I don't know how to explain that to anybody that think I'm not like a nutcase for saying it. Um, and I kept being shown these paths to light. And I didn't understand what it meant. And I just kept making sure that I was walking toward or staying on the side of the light and the positive energy and the and I just felt like there were like I was in amongst the presence of energies of positive and negative. But it wasn't just that. I felt like there was something dangerous and something very, very bad coming, and and it led up to the point where in around January I started seeing like this just like this blackness over like China, and I couldn't understand like why it was so black and so dark and why China was so heavily misted in some sort of like, and I didn't understand that at the time, and I just thought, this was when the outbreak was just starting, and this was like just after New Year's, and that was the last one I had, and after that it stopped.
Mm.
But it was this continuous buildup of bad, 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 and you can be safe if you just follow the light. And I don't know if I connected that inner sort of meditative state that I've had and the images that have come from that with my decision to turn into a prepper. But it seems that
A
when we talk
mindful
about it,
prepper.
yeah, a mindful prepper, yeah, a positively mindfully stated prepper or something like that. But
You could create a Telegram group, hopeful prepping.
hopeful. I don't think I want to be hopeful. I want to be more like the preppy prepper or something.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. The preppers
No,
will
but
make fun of you for being hopeful. But yeah, you want to be pragmatic, but you also want to have you connect to the light and
yeah, there's something to be said. I mean, meditation is something that's we always want to explain everything with science, and I understand a lot of people will just say that us saying this kind of stuff, we're just full of it and we're crazy and you can't prove it with science. But guess what? We can't prove it with science.
yeah.
But we still know things. We see things. We have premonitions. There's people who do all sorts of weird, wacky things like remote viewing and making predictions of the future. And some of them are right and some of them are wrong. And a lot of it's, we've seen a lot of this weird stuff on television that you think, come on, this is just ridiculous. But there is something to be said that, the Earth and the sun are gravitational forces. They're being affected by other gravitational and energy forces around us. We have a North and South Pole. We've seen evidence that the North and South Poles have shifted over time. We see energies that scientists can't explain about energy, how energy moves around the planet. And you know what? We have no idea how these gravitational forces and these energies and these vibrations affect us individually or as human race. We have no idea.
Yeah.
And our own planet and universe and solar system in an expanding universe are also moving through the universe and being affected by other energies and vibrations and such as well.
Yeah.
So
And there's
I'm not even going to
probably not
begin to
even
try to
more
explain
than
it.
one, there's probably more than just one universe, right? The multiverse theory. So
Oh yeah, there's certainly more than one
yeah,
version of the truth because if you look at just the concept of space-time and anything in quantum mechanics, then I mean, certainly there's going to be multi-dimensions that are already there that, there's also the Mandela effect and there's all sorts of weird stuff. And we
and I
can't
love it.
explain.
And I'll tell you,
Yeah,
I practice the or believe in the willing suspension of disbelief. Because if you go around as a skeptic, you're just not even that far off from being a cynic. And who wants to run around being a cynic everywhere, especially at a time of crisis like this when you need to be a light for others around you and for the world? So
that's it.
there's a term that I just recently learned from one of my Kabbalah teachers, David Guillaume, who was also a past guest on this show. Great episode. I highly recommend it. But I'll also include a link in the show notes, not just to that episode, but to this teaching, this class that he taught online. And in this, my wife and I were just listening to it. He talks about certainty beyond logic. If you can connect, it's easy to kind of dismiss the outbreak and so forth if it's not directly affecting you massively, right? So that's certainty within logic. That's not hard. But if you connect with certainty beyond logic, like there is a higher power that is protecting me, that I'm guided, angels are looking over me, however you want to frame it, but that you're connecting to certainty beyond logic, that's where you reveal tons of light, and that's where you plug right into to the fabric of creation. So I'll include a link to
That's
that.
really,
Yeah,
really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much, as I say, I kind of feel like there's so much we don't understand or don't know
yeah,
that sometimes we just have to go on what we see, what we experience, what we feel, what we sense. And if a number of us all see and sense and experience the same thing in different places, in different periods of time, but we can all compare those stories and they all align, then there's a truth that doesn't have to be proven through science, that can just be proven through story,
yeah,
through communication, through telling it to each other. And as I say, for me, I realize there's a big cosmic universe, and we don't understand most of science when it comes to the cosmic universe at all. So
yeah,
for us to say we haven't proven it in science just says, not yet,
yeah. Well,
but we might.
there's so much that we will never know. And I was so fixated on learning everything. I still am a bit kind of a seminar junkie, but I try to connect more to the tree of life than to the tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because there's a lot of darkness. There's quite a rabbit hole with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But if you just connect to the tree of life and just trust that life is happening for you, not to you, that there's a bigger picture, that that you're being looked after, et cetera, then this helps you to ground yourself and be a light for others and reveal lots of light out in the world. So that's what I do. I just try and remember to stay connected in that way. So
That's awesome. I love it.
yeah, so we're way past our
That's
normal
okay.
episode length, but I think our listeners will appreciate it because this is a really important topic, and we want to stay positive and yet stay prepared. Or if we're not prepared yet, get prepared.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing, as I say, there's not, you can't hurt to have some basic preparation of foods, medicines, and we didn't mention, but we'll just throw it in to have liquid vitamins
Yeah,
because they absorb in the body better. But just having basics is going to be something you will use no matter what. So yeah, absolutely. It's just let's be prepared and be here to support each other.
yeah. Yeah, so vitamin C is a must. Have that on store, especially if you end up getting sick. You want a mega dose on vitamin C. From my understanding, again, not medical advice, but my what I'm hearing is that taking enough vitamin C that you got to go to the bathroom really bad is what can help if you've got the virus. But yeah, so stay safe, stay positive, help others, be a light in the world, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much, Steve, for being here and for sharing your wisdom and all the great research and preparations that you've done with all of us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Stefan, and thanks everybody for taking the time to listen. I know it's been a long episode, but been really fun.
Yeah, yeah. So be sure to check out the show notes for all the links and all the various videos and Google Docs and all that. That'll all be on the show notes for this episode at getyourselfoptimized.com.